can tell you news-wise, Brad Scott, there's a high likelihood he won't be at the Kangaroos next year.
I can't shed any light on that. I mean, I think that speculation is fair.
My understanding, they've come to an agreement. It's a matter of when and not if.
I won't be speaking too much publicly about the future. I need to speak to the players first. No, there wouldn't have been any of them that knew what was going on. This would come up. I came to work yesterday expecting business as usual. I left work expecting business as usual. But on the way home, it wasn't.
The time was right for him to step aside, and we accepted his offer.
But to the next custodians, whoever they may be, I just say this: put the club first. Maintain your integrity at all times. Do what's right, not easy. Embrace the challenge. Enjoy the ride, because there's nothing but blue sky ahead for North Melbourne.
I think all we can say, guys, out of that, it's an embarrassing 3 days for the North Melbourne Football Club. The fact that Brad Scott said his wife, his manager, his own players didn't know what was going on, it's either poor management by North Melbourne or it was a hit job on Brad Scott to move him out, to force him out. And I'm leaning towards the latter, the way that it all unfolded.
I think his last words there pretty much summed it up. Put the club first, maintain your integrity. He was talking about himself. And that's exactly what he did right at the end. But clearly there were some other things going on behind the scenes. There's no doubt about that. But I thought the way he handled the end result right at the end, I thought he handled it with class. And I think that would have been part of the negotiation of the end result. And he did it very well.
How long do you think this has been in the making?
I think it's been in the making from the start of the year. I think there's been rumblings and, I hear along with, I guess, other ex-players and other people involved at the footy club that still have connections. And so it's been bubbling along for a while, and I get the feeling that this wasn't clearly meant to happen right now. It was pushed forward. For a number of reasons. I think the fact that there were rumblings, Tom Brown went with it about a month ago, if you remember rightly, and then those rumblings became louder and louder, and it got to a situation where they, obviously the Kangaroos, and thought we have to do it now. And Brad has copped it on the chin and
What do you think it came to a head?
What do I think it came to a head?
Like on Friday he leaves work and he thinks he's still got his job or he's still going to be coaching.
Yep.
On the way home, he gets a call to say that's changed. Why? What changed so dramatically on Friday afternoon, do you think?
Well, for me, I think it is simply because people started to know that this was going to happen at some stage, and people were starting to talk about it, and it was just getting louder and louder and louder, and people within the media obviously were hearing about it. It was going to be written. It was going to destabilise the club, I think, over the next 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks, whenever it was going to happen, invariably anyway. So they wanted to bring that forward.
Mick Warner's called it a hit job off the top of the show. That's a bit of a different message to what North Melbourne has said. That's amicable and we came to this agreement together. Do you think there was powerful North Melbourne influences behind the scene, past players in particular, that had a go in bringing down Brad Scott's demise quicker than he thought it was going to happen?
I think Brad, and in one of the comments that he made, where even people within the club didn't know what was going on. So the bosses within the club. So I think there's definitely people outside the club that have connections within the club, have had some sort of say in what's occurred. There's no question about that.
Okay, a little while ago, David King wrote an article, and we talked about it here on Talking Footy, and it was about the 29th of April this year, and he talked about the visitors to the club.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I said to you at that time, to me it sounded like there were rumblings with the old North Melbourne, and there were people working behind the scenes. This is the article that I'm talking about, that were working behind the scenes to unseat Brad Scott. Do you now think that that was the case back here when that article was written?
Yeah, I do, and I think Kingy's obviously speaks to people within the club. He still has some strong relationships with people also outside the club that's still quite powerful. And I think that was based off the back of a function, a life member function. I'm led to believe that obviously the great Ron Barassi, Dennis Pagan, you had all the life members there. A lot of people went to a lot of trouble to actually get to that particular function. And Brad, whose office was 20 metres away, didn't make the effort to put his head into the...
He was in the office at the time.
He was in the office at the time, didn't make the effort. This is my understanding.
Yeah.
Didn't make the effort to go and, I guess pay his respects at that function, and that wasn't looked upon very nicely at all. So I think that started to... And I'm just reading between the lines like everyone else. Obviously, I speak to people at the club, but I think that was the basis of Kingy's article, but I mean, he might have a different view of it. He might have other reasons why he wrote it as well, but I think that's certainly one that upset a few older people.
Mick, you talk about the campaign, OK. Around that same time, an old North Melbourne person, Peter Rausch, you quoted him in an article. I think it was a back page lead in the Herald Sun at the time. Are you saying that all these pieces were part of the campaign?
No, I don't think they're related, but I think in the end, Brad Scott wanted to leave on his terms, and forces against him decided when he would leave, and that was by making that story public on Friday. It blindsided the club. The club tried to mop it up, and at the press conference, you'd have to say was pretty good. But Friday night, the chairman of the club's ringing around, and they tried to manage the story. But it's clearly not the way that they wanted Brad Scott to exit. No. So you'd have to say it was a bit of a shambles the way it went down. But look, he's gone now, and the question is, where does he go? And the intrigue for me here is that he said he didn't even tell his manager, Craig Kelly, that he was leaving, which was shades of Ross Lyon, if you remember, in 2011, also managed by Craig Kelly. He went to the job that Mark Harvey had, who was also managed by Craig Kelly. So this is an intriguing aspect of this story, because Brendan Bolton and Alan Richardson are also managed by the same management company that Craig Kelly owns.
So, Das, can I ask you this question? Why do you think then that Brad Scott didn't speak? We're just looking at the Kelly gang there, the list of TLA clients there that Craig Kelly's company...
Strong gang.
Well, it is a very strong gang.
Half of the coaches in the competition.
Exactly. Why do you think then that Brad Scott said that he had a conflict of interest at his press conference yesterday? Yep. What was that conflict of interest?
It's a very good question, Tim, and I've got to declare a bit of interest because I've been managed by Craig Kelly as well for all the part of...
Hey, we all are. That's
I'm
joking.
Half the panel. But, and I don't have any insight into it, but I found that intriguing because really, you know, if he was just exiting and the chairman had rung Brad Scott and said, hey, look, we've come to an arrangement, you're out, then he has no conflict. He's only got a conflict if he's keen to go to one of the two clubs, or now we know one of the other clubs that Craig Kelly manages. So, you know, let's be honest. I mean, St Kilda and Carlton are going to be thinking about their coaches. And Alan Richardson and Brendan Bolton sitting here, they would accept that that is a fact. Now, if you're trying to move to one of those clubs and your manager manages people sitting there, that gets a very, very tricky, conflicted situation. So Ross Lyon saw at the time, he had no choice but to just go his own way, and maybe Brad Scott's decided, if I am to get another job, I've got to start managing myself through this situation. So that's the only way you can read that.
OK, do North Melbourne now, is it your view, and you would have spoken to North Melbourne people, I would think, in the last 24, 48 hours, OK. Is it their view that they would like an old North Melbourne shin-boner spirit type person to coach the club now?
It's an interesting question, and I don't know the true answer to that, to be honest, and I haven't asked those questions, and no one's, you know, said that to me at all.
Right.
What I said prior clearly have upset a couple of the others. That doesn't necessarily mean... I think when you go to a footy club, and I'm not saying Brad didn't do that, clearly if he didn't go to that function, that's upset some, and it probably, if he had his time again, he'd probably change that. But when you go to a footy club, and I remember when Brad first got to North Melbourne, the first thing that he wanted to do, this was a club that was on its knees in terms of, you know, they were trying to go to the Gold Coast, they were paying 92% of their salary cap, their facilities were absolutely, you know, terrible, so they had a lot of things, you know, going wrong. He's left that club, and for people to think that he's left this club in turmoil, I know everyone's saying, and I think Eddie might have come out and said, you know, maybe they should move to Tasmania. Just because a coach has left your footy club, this happens at lots of footy clubs, players leave, the clubs are bigger than any individuals. North Melbourne will get on with the job, they'll find a good coach. I'm not sure who that is, Tim. I haven't given it a great deal of thought, but I would have thought someone that has coached prior.
A couple of the great shinboners were asked exactly about that today, two of the current coaches. First, let's have a listen to John Longmire.
I haven't been offered any job, and because I've got a job here at the moment with the Sydney Swans and I'm contracted, that's what I'm doing.
You never say never though, can you?
Well, I'm just saying how it is. It's at the moment I've contracted the Swans. I've got Geelong coming up in Geelong this week.
So just left the door slightly open there, John Longmire, if you're a media expert and a reader of body language, Tim.
Well, I reckon if you're a career coach like John Longmire is, and there may be the opportunity to extend your contract in some way with all this speculation about you and shore up your position at Sydney, I don't know. I think he's got 2 years to run on his contract.
2 years to go.
2 years to run your contract. I mean, maybe if somebody comes to you and says, OK, here's a 5-year deal, you're going back to North Melbourne and it's for a lot of money, you go back to your current employer and you say, well, maybe you've got to up it a little bit, Duck, and maybe what we're seeing there, and I don't blame him at all. If he's playing the game, good luck to him.
There's no doubt, and why wouldn't you play the game? Coaches, as we've just seen, they're not often in the caper for too long, and I think by doing that is just smart. That's
Adam
smart
Simpson
business.
was asked about it on Channel 7 News tonight over in Perth. He was a little more definitive, the reigning premiership coach. Let's have a listen to Simo.
Did want to go straight to speculation linking you to the now vacant North Melbourne coaching job. You're a legend of that club. Can I ask, does it have any appeal at all?
Oh, look, Baz, I'm contracted, mate, and I'm really happy where I am. I'm at the start of a 4-year contract and we've just come off a premiership, so I'm happy where I'm at.
Would your former club be wasting their time even making a phone call?
Oh, look, I think they know where I stand with it all, mate, so... Yeah, look, it'll be old news pretty quickly for me.
When you played with both of those guys, John Longmire and Adam Simpson, do you think either of them are gettable for your old club?
I wouldn't have thought so. I think Horse is entrenched in Sydney. I don't know Horse has been there for a long time, but I think he's pretty happy with how his young Swans are going and their list. And as Simo said there, I mean, they're coming off a premiership and they're sitting nicely to back that up this year. So I can't see either of those guys leaving.
The other guy's Al Clarkson, who also played there. Ben Buckley, the chairman, says we've got plenty of cash, we can go after these guys, but I agree with you, I don't think they'd get either of those. The other area they probably need to look at is football department. I think someone like Peter Bell is someone they should look at to run football. But do you think that Brad Scott has left the list in fair shape? I mean, the guys that he brought in over summer, in Tyson and Aaron Hall, they haven't stacked up.
No, they haven't. I don't think they're a basket case at all. And look, these are some of the guys they obviously went after and didn't quite get. And it'd be fair to say that bottom row's not quite as...
and not as great as the top row, but they actually thought at one point they did have Dustin Martin.
Yeah, exactly. Look...
But is that fair for him to leave that list behind and just bail out the way
I think clearly one of the... And just once again reading between the lines, because no one's been really definitive in why this has come to this situation so quickly, but clearly the Kangaroos and people at the Kangaroos want to go in one direction. Brad wanted to go in another direction.
Right.
So, and I think that direction is to go with youth. So I think for the rest of the year you'll find Rhys Shaw, who's obviously the interim coach, I think you'll find a lot of the kids will be played and we'll find out just how good some of these kids are and whether they're up to playing AFL footy. So there'll be some tough decisions in and around the Kangaroos and maybe some of their absolute stars. When I say their stars, I mean Cunnington, Captain Jack Zeeble, Goldstein, all these guys, Mason Wood. I mean, they will have a look at whether will they trade one of those guys out to get some young...
Would you trade a Ben Brown?
I think it all has to be looked at. I don't think there's anyone that's untouchable at the Kangaroos in terms of how they will go forward.
Do you think it's the right thing to do, though, to go right back and clear the deck and build like that? Because that can be a long, slow, painful build.
But I don't think they're that far back. But yes, they do have to start looking at low draft picks, something that the Kangaroos have never had, Tim. And the reason why we haven't been able to bottom out. We've had to, so we bottom out, and when the club was less financial, the club now off the ground is as financial as it's ever been. So they've got that part of it right. I think now they can afford to drop back a little bit, start getting some low draft picks, something that they've never had, and set this club up for sustained success at the top for a period of time, rather than just be up there for 2 or 3 final series.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I'm not even sure that North Melbourne is tracking all that well. In fact, Eddie Maguire, the Collingwood president, who does weigh in every now and then on other clubs' matters, he had this to say after the news about Brad Scott, which I thought was intriguing.
Where does North Melbourne go? Do they become the Tasmanian team? I mean, they've had a couple of goes at this. They went to Sydney, they went to Canberra, they nearly went to the Gold Coast. They've been in Tasmania for a fair while.
I think Eddie, with due respect to him, should focus on what the Collingwood Football Club is doing and not worry about what North Melbourne Football Club is doing.
The point there is Tasmania don't want North Melbourne either. But you said...
They want Hawthorn?
No, they don't want Hawthorn either.
We'll they
just want their own team. Fair enough. But you said the other day that you felt your old club was irrelevant.
They're irrelevant in terms of us talking about them when they're in poor form. They're not irrelevant.
As a club.
What the AFL are throwing money at the Gold Coast and GWS and other clubs, North Melbourne right now are in the best position they could possibly. They've got a new facility. They're about to extend on that facility. Everything off the ground for the Kangaroos is going fantastically well. Right now on it, not so.